Today, when we see ancient people dancing for rain, burying the dead with objects, burning herbs, isolating the sick, wearing amulets, or performing rituals of purification, it is easy to think they were simply being superstitious, but that may be the least interesting part. The stranger question is this: why did almost every human society create rituals when life became too dangerous to understand? Because before hospitals, antibiotics, microscopes, weather satellites, germ theory, and modern anatomy, humans still had to answer the same brutal questions. Why did someone become sick? Why did a child die? Why did the animals disappear? Why did the sky stop giving rain? Why did one person survive and another collapse? Why did the body sometimes betray itself from the inside? And when you do not have a clear explanation, you do not simply live without one. Human beings are not built to calmly stare at chaos. We search for patterns. We repeat gestures. We gather around fires. We mark bodies. We separate the pure from the dangerous. We bury the dead in careful ways. We sing, wash, burn, fast, sacrifice, chant, wait, obey, and hope. We create rituals, not because humans were too foolish to think, but because thinking alone was not enough. When the world was terrifying, invisible, and unpredictable, ritual gave people something they could actually do. A ritual could not always stop a disease. It could not always bring rain. It could not always protect a child, save a crop, or explain why death had entered the village. But it could turn fear into action. It could turn panic into sequence. It could turn a scattered group of frightened bodies into a community moving together. And in a world where survival often depended on the group not falling apart, that mattered. To understand why rituals became so important, we have to imagine a world before our categories existed. Today, we separate things. Disease belongs to medicine. Weather belongs to meteorology. Grief belongs to psychology. Crime belongs to law. Death belongs to biology, religion, family, and bureaucracy, depending on which room you are standing in. Ancient humans did not always divide the world this way. A sickness in the body, a failed hunt, a drought, a strange dream, a stillborn child, a violent storm, and a sudden death could all feel connected by unseen forces. The invisible was not one category. It was the atmosphere of life itself. If a person became ill, the cause might not be understood as a microbe entering the body. It might be understood as pollution, imbalance, punishment, spirit intrusion, broken taboo, bad luck, angered ancestors, hostile magic, or a danger moving through the community. Those explanations could be wrong in a modern biological sense, but the fear underneath them was not imaginary. Something was killing people. Something was making bodies weak. Something was spreading through families. Something was turning the familiar world hostile. The problem was not that ancient people had no intelligence. The problem was that they often had no reliable way to see the cause. A virus does not announce itself. Bacteria do not look like enemies to the naked eye. Malnutrition can look like a curse. Infection can look like possession. Contamination can look like impurity. Trauma can look like a spirit. Weather can look like a mood of the sky. So the world was full of dangers that had effects, but no visible face. And this is where ritual becomes more than a strange cultural habit. Ritual is what humans often build when danger is real, but the cause is hidden. Imagine a small community after several people become sick. There is no laboratory test, no clear diagnosis, no public health department, no understanding of airborne transmission or contaminated water. People can see the fever, the vomiting, the weakness, the fear in the eyes of families, but they cannot see what moves from one body to another. The worst part is not only the disease, it is the uncertainty. Should people touch the sick person? Should they share food? Should the body be washed? Should the house be avoided? Should the family be blamed? Should the whole group leave? Should they pray, burn herbs, call a healer, perform a cleansing, isolate the person, or wait? Doing nothing is almost impossible. A ritual answers the question that fear asks first. What do we do now? It gives the group a script. Bring water. Light the fire. Call the elder. Wash the hands. Mark the doorway. Move the body. Sing this song. Do not eat that food. Do not enter that place. Wait until the ceremony is complete. Repeat the action exactly. Follow the order. To a modern observer, some of these actions may look arbitrary, but the structure itself has power. A ritual takes a moment that feels formless and gives it edges. It tells people where to stand, who speaks, what must be touched, what must not be touched, when the danger begins, and when the danger has passed. It may not explain the world correctly, but it organizes human beings inside the world. That is one reason rituals appear so often around crisis. Birth, death, sickness, hunting, war, harvest, storms, drought, initiation, marriage, burial, grief. These are moments when ordinary life breaks open. A child enters the group. A body leaves it. Food becomes uncertain. The future becomes dangerous. The boundary between safety and threat becomes unclear. Ritual marks the boundary. It says this moment is not ordinary. Behave differently here. And that simple move may be one of the oldest forms of human survival, because fear without structure spreads. A frightened group can turn on itself. It can accuse the wrong person. It can abandon the weak too early. It can refuse necessary action. It can scatter when coordination matters most. It can freeze. Ritual does not only calm individuals, it coordinates groups. When everyone follows the same sequence, the group becomes readable to itself. People know what others are doing. They know who has authority. They know when to gather and when to stay away. They know which object matters, which place is dangerous, which body must be handled carefully, which food is forbidden, which gesture shows respect, and which act breaks the rule. This is easy to underestimate from a modern point of view because we have replaced many rituals with institutions. A hospital has protocols. A courtroom has procedures. A military unit has drills. A school has ceremonies. A nation has flags, funerals, inaugurations, minutes of silence, and public memorials. We do not always call these things rituals because they look official instead of ancient, but they still do something similar. They turn uncertainty into ordered action. Ancient rituals did this without modern institutions. They created a shared behavioral script before there were printed manuals, emergency systems, or scientific explanations. This is especially important because the human brain is deeply sensitive to uncertainty. When something threatens us and we cannot control it, the mind often reaches for repetition, order, and predictability. Ritualized behavior tends to be structured. It has sequences. It has rules. It is often rigid. You do the same thing, in the same order, with the same words, gestures, objects, or movements. That rigidity can look irrational, but psychologically, it makes sense. When the outside world becomes unstable, a repeated action gives the body a small pocket of stability. The sky may not obey you. The disease may not stop. The dead may not return. But the song has a beginning and an end. The washing follows in order. The fire is lit in the right way. The body is placed in the right position. The group knows when to speak and when to be silent. The ritual gives fear a shape, and fear with a shape is easier to carry than fear without one. This does not mean rituals were magic anxiety machines that always made people feel better. Human culture is too complicated for that. Some rituals were comforting, some were terrifying, some were beautiful, some were violent, some probably helped people endure crisis. Others may have increased fear by making invisible threats feel even more powerful. But across cultures, rituals often appear where humans meet the limits of control. They appear when ordinary action is not enough, but no action at all is unbearable. And once a ritual is shared, it becomes more than a private coping mechanism. It becomes social glue. People who sing together, move together, mourn together, fast together, march together, or keep silence together often feel, at least for a moment, that they are part of the same body. Their breathing can align. Their movements can align. Their emotions can align. The individual fear becomes collective, and collective fear, when organized, is less likely to dissolve into chaos. This matters because ancient survival was rarely individual. A lone person could be strong, clever, brave, and still die quickly without the group. Humans survived through shared labor, shared memory, shared protection, shared food, shared warnings, shared childcare, and shared meaning. A ritual could remind people that they belonged to something larger than their own panic. When a community buried its dead together, it was not only disposing of a body, it was saying, "This death has a place. This grief has witnesses. This person belonged to us. The living must continue." That is why mortuary rituals are so important in human history. Archaeologists find burials that suggest care, attention, positioning, objects, pigments, offerings, or repeated practices around the dead. The exact meanings are often debated, and we should be careful not to pretend we can read every ancient mind. But one thing is clear. Humans did not treat death as ordinary trash. Again and again, they made death into an event that required form, and that form had consequences. A body is not only a biological problem, it is an emotional problem, a social problem, and sometimes a practical problem. It must be moved, protected, mourned, remembered, avoided, honored, or transformed. Without a ritual, the dead can become unbearable. For the living, with a ritual, grief receives a path. People know when to gather, when to cry, when to speak, when to leave, and how to return to life after the world has been broken. In some cases, ritual may also have had practical effects, even if the people performing it did not understand those effects in modern scientific terms. Purification rituals might involve washing, smoke, fire, separation, or the removal of contaminated objects. Isolation rituals might keep certain people away from the group during illness, childbirth, menstruation, mourning, or suspected impurity. Food taboos might prevent certain dangerous foods from being eaten in specific contexts. Burial practices might keep decomposing bodies away from daily life. Herbal rituals might preserve real knowledge about plants, pain, infection, or altered states. But this is where we need to be careful. It would be too simple to say that ancient rituals were just science in disguise. They were not. Many rituals had symbolic, religious, political, emotional, or social meanings that cannot be reduced to hygiene or medicine. A food taboo might protect health in one setting, express identity in another, enforce status in another, and have no simple practical explanation at all. A purification rite might involve real cleaning, but it might also define who belongs, who is dangerous, who has crossed a boundary, and who needs to be restored. The stronger point is not that every ritual secretly worked. The stronger point is that ritual could organize useful behavior even when the explanation behind it was not scientifically accurate. A community does not need germ theory to learn that certain forms of separation matter. It does not need chemistry to notice that some plants change pain, sleep, fever, or consciousness. It does not need epidemiology to develop rules around bodies, waste, food, water, or contact. The ritual may explain the rule through spirits, purity, ancestors, curses, or sacred law. But the behavior itself can still shape survival. This is one of the strangest things about human culture. A belief can be wrong about the invisible cause and still produce a useful, visible action. People may burn herbs for spiritual reasons, but the smoke can still mark a boundary. People may isolate someone because they are considered ritually impure, but the separation can still reduce contact. People may avoid a food because of taboo, but the rule can still prevent risk in certain environments. People may gather to chant over a sick person, and even if the chant does not cure the disease, the gathering can ensure that the sick person is watched, fed, touched, protected, or not abandoned. Ritual often works at more than one level at the same time. It can be symbolic and practical, emotional and political, spiritual and social, protective and controlling, healing and frightening. That is why judging it as true or false misses so much. The ritual may be false as an explanation and still powerful as a behavior. It may fail to control nature and still succeed at controlling the human response to nature. This helps explain the role of ritual specialists. In many societies, there were people whose job was to deal with invisible danger: shamans, healers, priests, diviners, elders, medicine people, midwives, mourners, or ritual leaders. These figures varied enormously across cultures, so we should not treat them as one universal type, but they often occupied a crucial position. When the group did not know what was happening, someone had to interpret the signs. Someone had to say what the dream meant, why the hunt failed, which ancestor was angry, what plant should be used, which song should be sung, which rule had been broken, or what action must happen next. The ritual specialist was not always just a doctor in the modern sense. They could be a performer, therapist, storyteller, judge, herbalist, spiritual mediator, memory keeper, and political figure at the same time. They worked in the space where body, fear, meaning, and community overlapped. A sick person did not only need a substance placed on the skin or swallowed into the stomach. They needed the group to recognize that something had happened. They needed someone to explain the suffering. They needed a path back into ordinary life if they survived, or a path into memory if they did not. In this sense, ancient healing was often not only about the body, it was about the body inside a world of relationships. Who touched the sick person? Who was blamed? Who was forgiven? Who was excluded? Who was restored? Who had the authority to say the danger was over? Ritual answered these questions, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally. And that brings us to the darker side of ritual, because a ritual is not automatically wise just because it is old. The same force that can hold a group together can also turn a group against someone. If fear needs a shape, sometimes that shape becomes a victim, a scapegoat, an outsider, a woman accused of impurity, a stranger blamed for disease, a child marked by omen, a person treated as polluted, cursed, possessed, or dangerous. Ritual can create care, but it can also create exclusion. It can coordinate healing, but it can also coordinate violence. Sacrifice, punishment, forced purification, public humiliation, violent initiation, and accusations of spiritual danger all show that ritual is not simply a beautiful human invention. It is a powerful one, and powerful human inventions are never innocent by default. A ritual can reduce panic by giving the group an action, but the action can be cruel. It can make suffering meaningful, but meaning can be used to justify suffering. It can make people feel united, but unity can become terrifying when it requires an enemy. This is why the best way to understand ritual is not to romanticize it or mock it. Ancient humans were not simply foolish, and they were not secretly modern scientists wearing animal skins and masks. They were human beings living with limited tools, intense danger, and the same nervous system we still carry. They needed ways to survive fear before they could explain it. Ritual was one of those ways. Sometimes it protected, sometimes it harmed. Often it did both at once. And maybe the most unsettling part is that ritual never disappeared. We like to think modern life replaced ritual with reason. In some ways it did. We have medicine, law, emergency rooms, laboratories, weather forecasts, vaccination programs, sanitation systems, and scientific models of disease. These are not just new rituals. They are real forms of knowledge and technology that have saved millions of lives. But they did not erase the ritual mind. They changed where it lives. A surgeon scrubs in a precise sequence before entering an operating room. A judge wears a robe. A national flag is raised in a ceremony. Students cross a stage in gowns to mark graduation. Families gather around a coffin and say words that have been said before. Athletes repeat the same movements before a competition. People light candles after tragedy. A crowd stands in silence for 1 minute. A couple exchanges rings. A person checks the door 3 times before sleeping, not because the third check adds much information, but because the repeated action quiets something inside them. Some of these modern rituals are official, some are personal, some are secular, some are religious, some are harmless, some can become obsessive or damaging. But they reveal something ancient. Humans still use repeated gestures to cross invisible thresholds, from single to married, from student to graduate, from alive to dead, from danger to safety, from chaos to order, from ordinary time to sacred or official time. We still need signs that something has changed. Even science uses ritual-like forms, not as a substitute for evidence, but as a way to protect it. Laboratories have procedures, hospitals have checklists, courts have rules of speech, democracies have ceremonies for transferring power. These are not superstitions in the ancient sense. But they show that humans still trust repeated, formalized action when the stakes are high. The difference is that modern protocols are supposed to be tested, revised, and justified by evidence. Ancient rituals were often justified by tradition, myth, authority, or sacred order, but both reveal the same human need. When something matters, we do not want action to be random. That may be the hidden continuity between ancient rituals and modern life. We are not less ritualistic than our ancestors because we are smarter. We are differently ritualistic because we know more. We have better explanations for disease, weather, anatomy, infection, trauma, and death. But when fear arrives, we still reach for form. We still gather. We still repeat. We still mark the moment. We still want someone to tell us what happens next. The ancient world was filled with invisible dangers. Some were real, but misunderstood. Some were imagined. Some were social, some were biological. Some came from the sky, the body, the forest, the water, the dead. the stranger, or the group itself. Ritual gave those dangers a visible shape. It made them touchable, speakable, movable, washable, burnable, mournable, punishable, or survivable. And maybe that was its deepest function. Not to make humans perfectly rational, and not to make the world perfectly safe, but to keep people from being swallowed by the unknown. So when we look at ancient rituals, we should not only ask whether the beliefs were true. We should ask what the ritual allowed people to do. Did it gather the community? Did it calm the body? Did it mark a danger? Did it protect a boundary? Did it remember the dead? Did it give authority to a healer? Did it isolate the sick? Did it turn grief into something people could survive together? Did it give fear a shape before knowledge could give it a name? Ancient rituals do not only show how wrong humans were about the world. They show how deeply humans needed to act before they could understand. Maybe ancient humans did not create rituals because they were foolish. Maybe they created them because the world was terrifying, invisible, unpredictable, and doing nothing was never a human option. A ritual was a way to hold the group together long enough to survive the unknown. And the strange thing is, once you see ritual this way, the ancient world does not feel as distant as it did before. We still have our ceremonies, our habits, our protocols, our repeated gestures, our words for grief, our uniforms, our songs, our silences, and our small private routines before facing something we cannot fully control. So before you leave, think about one ritual you still follow without calling it a ritual. Something you do before sleep, before work, before grief, before travel, before a difficult conversation, before stepping into uncertainty. And if this video made you see that gesture differently, subscribe for more strange investigations into the human behaviors we think we understand until we look closer.